Money might not solve all of your problems, but it does allow you to sleep in a nice cushy apartment in Upper East Side for a whole year without worrying about rent.
What's the name of the book?
And I'm like,
I want to die, but I want to eat dukkbokki.
this book will not uplift you. I have never been so angry after reading a book. I was seething. Today, we're going to rate every single book I read in the past 12 months, and there are 24 of them. And a lot of the books I gravitated towards this year had to do with rich people, money, status, loneliness, and burnout. And if you're new here, I'm Elise. I'm a 31-year-old dietitian living here in the Silicon Valley. And my videos have to do with my relationship with money, life, new obsessions. Clearly, reading has been one of them this year. And it really was one of my friends that got me back into reading. We walked by a bookstore and one book caught my eye that got me back into reading. And that book was Free Food for Millionaires by Min Jin Lee, who also wrote Pachinko. So for anyone who grew up poor, who had to climb the social ladder later in life and had to assimilate to white people culture, this is the book for you. Set in Queens, Casey, who is a child of Korean immigrants and her parents work at a dry cleaners, she ventures into New York City, Manhattan, and goes into the world of finance and investment banking and starts to see that lifestyle unfold and wants more of that herself. So it's really an interesting glimpse into New York's elite, or at least finance elite. Everything about this main character resonated with me. Her relationship with her parents, the slight shame that she feels about her upbringing, her trying to assimilate into this new, shiny, rich world. And to know that it's not weird to feel ashamed of your past, but also want something better for yourself was deeply, deeply soothing. So this book slaps. And so the way I'm going to rate this is a book slaps if it changed my worldview, made me feel something deep down inside, or was just really, really thought-provoking. And then there's A, B. I'm going to skip C, D, F because that feels really demoralizing for the authors who have spent maybe years of their life writing these stories. I'm just going to say it's not for me. And there will be a category of I couldn't finish this book for one reason or another. After Free Food for Millionaires, I was really on a rich people kick. The book after that I chose was The Ascent of Money, the history of money basically in one book. So very much nonfiction, very dense. If you ever want to know how money runs the world and the history of how it ran the world, this is the book for you. Like the Renaissance and how the Medici family basically bankrolled it, how the French Revolution can be traced back to a stock market bubble, and even the 2008 crisis here in the States. What I took away from this book is the stock market is so weird. A company can just be pretending to be companying and building hype, and people will be investing in that stock until you realize that it hasn't been growing at all. It has no profits, and then the bubble bursts. And that's exactly how John Law basically conned the entire French government. This man encouraged the French people to invest in these stocks in America, in Mississippi. France is so far, no one really knows what's going on in Mississippi. And then finally people realized that this company was not making any profit and stocks plummeted, which left the entire French economy in turmoil. It collapsed the entire financial system. Money is wild, guys. So this book, I would give an A+. I would give it slaps, but it's just so dense it sometimes feels like a textbook.
She's a dense girl.
And then following this book, I picked up The Status Game by Will Storr. It answers the question, why do we all care about status and money so much? According to his research, it shows that the desire for status is so subconscious, just like how our desire to eat food or drink water. Like, it's as prominent as thirst and hunger for us as humans. One of the reasons why I picked up this book in the first place was one of my friends was talking about tennis and all of these like designer goods, and I don't do or engage in any of those things. So I felt really left out, and I felt bad about myself after that conversation of like, maybe I'm not cool enough to be included in this friend circle, which got me thinking like, why do we seek these status things, right? By the end of this book, I realized that if you just surround yourself with people who value the same things that you value, then you're probably good. But if all of your friends value Chanel bags and playing tennis or some like elite sport like sailing, then you're gonna feel the need to keep up and do those things and participate and spend all that money. So I would rate this an A. It really did help me look at the world in a new light. At the end of the day, it's just like a human need, and we do all seek it for acceptance. I picked up The House of the Rothschilds by the same author of The Ascent of Money, And again, nonfiction, very dense. If you've ever wanted to get an inside look at one of the wealthiest families in the world, Nikki Hilton's husband, this is the book for that. As of today, the Rothschilds' net worth is still in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and they gained their wealth in the 19th century, so it's been a few hundred years. This family, a Jewish family in Germany, established the first banking system in Germany, and then he sent his 5 sons to all of these different European countries to control the banking systems and leverage international currency and trade. I could not finish this book because every son's name had Mayer in it. And Mayer Amschel Rothschilds was the original man who accumulated a lot of the family wealth. So every son, there were 8 mayors in this family. I could not keep up. So I could not finish this book. All I know, this family is very rich. I read $1 Million Weekend. It's very much a self-help book. If you ever wanted to know how you could make $1 million business by the end of a weekend, this one's for you. My real takeaway is that you just need to start with a very small feasible number. What is the income that you think you need to either take a break from your job or quit your job? For me, it's $3,000. And then let's come up with problems that you have or problems that rich people or businesses have on a day-to-day basis and solve that problem for them and make that a business, or at least talk to your friends, talk to potential customers, and get to know what they think. So being brave, not being afraid of failure, and talking to strangers was a big takeaway for this book. I would give it an A for a self-help book. It's very action-oriented. It gives you very specific things to try and do. Now for the existential crisis portion of my book list. The Midnight Library was absolutely phenomenal. If you've ever wondered, did I make the right life decision choosing this job, this partner, this city to live in? What if I lived there instead and chose to marry someone else? Those are all the questions that this book answers, and I don't want to spoil it too much. But up until now, the main character's life has been nothing but regret and misery, and she regrets not pursuing to be an Olympic swimmer, or not studying to be this or that, or marrying that person. Every single chapter, she gets to reverse a life decision and choose a different life path. So you see that all unfold. And the reason I chose this book is because I was having a mini/weekly existential crisis about my career. It's been 5 years of me being a dietitian. Do I still love my job? Sure. Have I had the same conversation over and over again with people for the past 5 years? How it made me feel by the end was every time I have I should have done this, I could have done that, I think about how it would have played out, and it makes me grateful for my current life. And so I think in that way, it is a deeply thought-provoking book. I would give it slaps, 10 out of 10, amazing, thought-provoking, life-changing. And then after I read that book, I wanted to pick up a book exactly like it. And so the one that Amazon and Goodreads suggested was Before Your Memory Fades, and it's set in this beautiful, almost Studio Ghibli-like town in Japan. I think it's in Hokkaido, and you can see the water from the hillside. For anyone who's lost a loved one and regretted not being able to say goodbye or last words, this is the book for you. So basically, this coffee shop offers anyone who wants to the ability to go back in time and talk to a loved one. At the end of the day, every time I read this book, it made me feel calm and a little melancholy. So I would rate it a B. It was cute, it was quaint, it was serene, but also just sad to think about. So if that's the mood you're in, then this might be a good book for you. Now onto the Burnout chapter. The Convenience Store Girl, another Japanese author, really quirky. If you've ever read a quirky Japanese novel, this is up there. And if you've ever thought about quitting your day job to work at Trader Joe's or a cafe, this is the book for you. It's about this woman who is in her 30s and she works at a convenience store like a 7-Eleven in Japan, which, are fantastic and dope. But her family is telling her, why don't you get a real career? Why don't you start a family, find a husband? And she takes it to heart and she decides one day to quit her convenience store job. And when she does that, she realizes that she loves working at the convenience store. It brings her so much joy to see her customers, to stock the goods, and she goes back to the convenience store. And if you're happy working at your 7-Eleven or Trader Joe's, don't let anyone take that away from you, because you might be miserable working a high-paying, high-status job, but those are 40 very miserable hours a week. And the only time you get to brag about your job is the 5 minutes at lunch with your friends on a Saturday. This book slaps. It really made me think about how other people affect you, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. I know it's hackneyed, but I needed this book. And then I stumbled upon There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. The cover itself was hilarious, and I was like, okay, please tell me the answer. Is there an easy job? And that's why I picked it up. Very quirky. I would even say more quirky than the previous book. This main character is burnt out, and she goes into an employment agency and just wants the most mind-numbing work that doesn't involve critical thinking, reading, or writing, or anything hard. Like watching a hidden camera tape for any suspicious activity, or writing like inspirational quotes or questions on rice cracker wrappers. There's a lot of mysterious things that happen in this book that I can't explain, nor do I know why they happened to her. I would rate this a B minus. It has a lot of random bits and bobs in there. I like the ending. So you just gotta read to the end, I guess. Next is my year of rest and relaxation. Is resting and sleeping for a year the answer to all of life's woes? So the main character is this beautiful, thin, smart, gorgeous girl who just graduated from Columbia and lives in the Upper East Side, comes from family money. And she is going through a lot internally and decides to just take sleeping pills for a whole year and sleep her woes away. The vibes of this book were very much New York, elite cynicism about life. So very witty, very sarcastic. There's no real takeaways for me here. It was just interesting to think about the premise of sleeping for a full year. Money might not solve all of your problems, but it does allow you to sleep in a nice cushy apartment in Upper East Side for a whole year without worrying about rent. I would give it like a solid B, maybe B+. I think it was interesting. Very New York. Now, jumping to the West Coast, to Silicon Valley, the book Ripe talks all about burnout. So if you've been in corporate America and just feel like you're dead inside, this book is for you. This book is about a girl who lives in SF and works in the Silicon Valley and feels like the life is draining out of her every day that she works in corporate America, working on unethical projects. On the weekdays, I read in bed before bedtime. And on weekends, I'll read first thing in the morning when I'm eating my breakfast. Every time I tried to read this before bed, it just felt like I was at work again, like commuting to work, Silicon Valley, going to the office, which is the last thing I want to be brought back into at 10 p.m. when I'm trying to go to bed. This is like a me problem. This book is not for me, but if you want a book that highlights a depressed, languishing woman working in corporate America, this might be comforting. Another book about depression is I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Dukkbokki, and it's a Korean novel. If you're someone who's persistently low in your mood or depressed, this book will not uplift you. The main character is a social media director, and she's feeling very depressed about her life, and she doesn't even realize what it is. She just knows that something is wrong with her and goes to a psychiatrist for the first time in her life. You know how in Asian countries, like mental health is not very talked about, so no one really knows what's going on inside and they don't know what emotions are? It felt like this character didn't know what emotions were and was working through what depression felt like for the first time in her life. Felt a little bit slow for me. In the library looking for this book, I had to ask the librarian because I could not find it, and the librarian was like, "What's the name of the book?" And I'm like,
I want to die, but I want to eat dukkbokki.
Was the most mortifyingly embarrassing experience in a library. This book is not for me. It was a little bit too slow. And then following this book, I read another Korean author's book called the Hyunam bookstore. So if you've ever fantasized about quitting your job and opening a coffee shop or bookstore, this one's for you. It's set in Seoul, and the main character decides to quit her job and open up a bookstore. Along the way, she hires a barista to man her coffee shop inside the bookstore. This barista had studied so hard his entire life, got into college, studied so hard to get good grades, but has not been able to get a job for the past 5 years. And it really got me thinking about my parents immigrating over from China when I was 4. Had I stayed in China, the competition amongst the students in the schools would have been so high. I would have been Like, definitely the dumbest person in the classroom. I remember for 1 year, I took Chinese lessons in SF. And mind you, I did K through 12 in Marin County, where a lot of drama kids, a lot of people in the liberal arts, right? But I took Chinese class in SF proper, and I was the lowest ranked person. They actually ranked us, and I was the dumbest kid. And I was actually like almost valedictorian in my school in Marin County. Anyways, all that to say is Asian kids are crazy about studying. They'll study 2 grades ahead just to stay on top of everyone else. So had I stayed in China, I would have fallen behind, and God knows where I would have landed in my career, in society. Moving to the States and moving to Marin, I was a big fish in a smaller pond. So I'm really glad I escaped the hyper competitiveness of Asia and Asian school systems. And this is the book that got me to appreciate that. I would give it like a B++. Like, it was cute, it was quaint, it was cozy, it felt like you were in a bookstore the entire time. It didn't blow my mind though. It just made me really depressed about the Asian, and more specifically, the Korean school system. I feel so bad for those kids. Another Asian book is Counterfeit by Kristin Chen. If you're into designer bags, if you're into the Chanels, the Gucci's, the Hermes, and how they're made and what that whole business is like, this is the book for you. So basically, the main character develops this scheme to take designer bags, take fake designer bags, and return it back to Nordstrom's or Neiman Marcus or any store in the US. And because they're so well made, people get duped and they're like, oh, I guess I'll give you the money. They just make a lot of money scamming people. I have never been so angry after reading a book. I was seething. My boyfriend had to calm me down. The reason is, this book perpetuates the stereotype that counterfeit bags and just like fake stuff comes from Asia, right? Which, to be fair, it does. I wish that there was more character development. It just felt like the character is very one-dimensional, and this author, who is, I guess, Singaporean in descent, or maybe Chinese in descent, but born in Singapore, just perpetuated the stereotype and didn't make us think critically about it in any other light. Like, if she had just spun the angle a little bit and not made this character so bad and just humanized her a little bit more at the end, it would have made more sense. It just made me feel even more ashamed to be Chinese. I have a lot of internalized racism about being Chinese. It just adds fuel to the fire. Paint us in a better light. Paint us at least in a more creative light. Not for me. This book is not for me. Is it a page turner? Yes, but it's just like deeply disappointing. The next book is set in Tibet. And lo and behold, it has to do with China basically wrecking Tibetan culture, the people, through the Cultural Revolution and beyond. As someone who has always romanticized Tibet, Tibetan Buddhism, the mountains, the Himalayas, this book is painting the picture of what happened to this one village in Tibet right before the Cultural Revolution, during and after. And I didn't realize how terribly they were treated by the Chinese government throughout the past 100 years. I would rank this like a B+ because it only really focused on a few people from this one village in Tibet, so it was a very micro view, but she did a very good job of just looking at this very specific town. I'm actually gonna read her other novel about North Korea and how these people slowly realize that the government does not have their back. But fascinating journalistic take on a very secluded part of the world. On to my whether or not to have kids era. Breasts and Eggs is a Japanese novel about a woman in her, I think, late 30s trying to decide whether or not she wants kids and the fear of being alone. Definitely also touches on body autonomy and the ethics of having a sperm donor kid. I would actually say not for me. The energy, the vibes of this book were like low and moody. If you're thinking about this question, maybe it'll resonate with you. Another theme that came up was loneliness, and Clara and the Sun, also by a Japanese author, was a really interesting sci-fi take on robot friends. So if you're tired of making plans with friends and just wish you had a robot as a friend, this book is for you. It's very futuristic. Personally, not for me. I don't love sci-fi books. It is scary because we are all becoming more and more antisocial and isolated. I could totally see a world in which robot friends could be maybe helpful. All the Lovers in the Night by the same author as Breasts and Eggs is about a copywriter who lives a very lonely life, who doesn't really know how to socialize. I think she actually has a clinical diagnosis. Like, she's probably on the spectrum, or at least just very isolated. And it's just her day in and day out life. Again, very slow pace. If you were to imagine like silent film, this is that kind of book. Again, not for me. Also, it was interesting to see that there's a lot of people, you know, in their 30s and 40s who don't have a social life after work. And that's totally normal if you don't have plans on a Friday night or Saturday night or Sunday night. There's a lot of people out there who really crave friendship and just don't really know how to connect with people. The Goodbye Cat, another Japanese author, is about all of these cats. It's 7 cats and their lives. Basically, you get to see the world through their eyes as they're meandering through the world with humans, and it's just a really cute novel. I definitely cried during this book. This was when Pumpkin was sick with her liver enzymes in the thousands. I would give it like a B+. Again, it didn't blow my mind and it didn't change my worldview, but it was very cute. It's a very endearing book. Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. If you want a story about family, mothers, cancer, and just being a child having to go through all of that and the grief process, this is a great book for that. For me, it's a B, really touching, but didn't change my world. Now on to the love stories and the very unserious novels. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is for you if you want to know how luck and ambition can mix together and create fame, and how love and marriage can come in all different shades. Also, Evelyn started off as an immigrant and worked herself up to all of this fame. So it's a very started from the bottom, now we're here novel. I would give it an A. It was definitely a page turner and full of surprises and twists and turns. Big Swiss is a very dark and twisted and quirky novel. Never have I ever had a novel where I had to close my eyes in one of the chapters. Whenever I watch a scary movie, I close my eyes because I don't want to see it and I don't want to have nightmares. That's exactly what happens in this novel. There is something bad that happens. It's an interesting take on how 2 different people can deal with trauma and how their lives can unfold in very different ways. This woman who works with a sex therapist, she transcribes his sessions, begins to fall in love with one of the clients, and you'll get to see how that unfolds. I would give this like a B-. It was an interesting story, but very dark. Cleopatra and Frankenstein, this one set in New York City and Manhattan, is about a 24-year-old British girl who falls in love and marries this marketing director, 20 years her senior, and the love story that unfolds, and also just like a coming of age, like what to do with your life as a 20-year-old artist. Has a lot of British dry humor and sarcasm. It's very modern. It's very New York City. If you want to know what like the cool art scene is like, it's an interesting take and peek into it. For me, I would give it a B+. It lined up with my New York City trip. It was a good pregame for before I went to New York. And it does shed light on how people are attracted to each other and just how different people can bring out different parts of yourself. Oh my God, the last 2 are based in Europe. So if you're going to Europe this summer, these are some books to consider. Perfume Collector is set in Paris. So basically the main character who lives in England gets an unexpected inheritance from this woman in Paris, and she flies over to see what's happening, what's going on. Along the way, you'll see another rags to riches story of a woman who didn't came from a lot and finding her way in the world, being really savvy with a lot of street smarts, making a name for herself and gaining a lot of money throughout the way. And along the way, perfume is involved. There is a lot of perfume making and selling, and that's how some of the money is made. But it took me a long time to finish reading this, so I would give it like a B+. Interesting novel. There's a lot of layers to it. It just takes a little bit of time. Finally, the 24th book is One Italian Summer, set in Positano. So this girl from LA just lost her mom to cancer, and their last trip together was they were supposed to go to Positano together, and that didn't end up happening, so she goes solo. And along the way, a lot of things happen. She reflects on her mother, but this book honestly is not for me. something about the writing. This is the only book on the list where the writing is kind of poor. It just is, it's not very inspiring writing, like style wise. And for some reason, the author always feels the need to like name drop very expensive shops and stores in LA, like Erewhon. And I just think it's unnecessary for a novel. It just feels like a weird ego thing. But anyways, not for me, but it did make me want to go to Positano and the Amalfi Coast. It sounds absolutely beautiful. So if you want to just be transported to Italy on a budget, this would be a fun book to read. And so 24 books in, I have learned so much about money, rich people, poor people, burnout. A lot of people are feeling burnt out, or maybe I'm just gravitating towards these books because I'm burnt out. So it's been so comforting to read these books. And then I'm super excited. My next 4 books that I want to read are already here. I am most excited to read Guns, Germs, and Steel, about why white people have dominated our world for the past few hundred years. I'm going to get to the root of it and report back. I'm super excited to read, well, I've already started A Little Life. It's set in New York City about 4 friends, rich and poor. So you have a little bit of like a class difference. So I'm excited to sink into this already after the first chapter. The writing is so beautiful. If you have any books that you loved, that slapped, that changed your life, that changed your worldview, please drop them in the comments. And if you like this video, please let me know. Please leave a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.